Americans are paying more for new vehicles, not because of greedy dealers or temporary market disruptions, but because the modern automobile has become a government regulated platform. What once functioned as personal transportation is now a rolling compliance device, and the cost of that transformation is embedded into every vehicle's cost. The result is a car market where prices are high by design and unlikely to come down. Now, the average transaction price for a new vehicle now approaches $50,000, and that figure is not driven by consumer excess or dealer markups. It reflects a system in which federal mandates, regulatory layers, and forced technology additions steadily rise the baseline cost of every vehicle before it ever reaches the showroom. Dealers sell what they're allowed to sell, and consumers pay for what regulators require to be built. You don't have a choice. And vehicle prices remain elevated because the cost of building a compliant vehicle continues to rise. Federal safety rules, emissions mandates, cybersecurity requirements, and connectivity standards now dictate vehicle architecture. Automakers no longer decide which technologies to include based solely on consumer demand. They build to regulatory specification. Those specifications grow more and more complex every year. Advanced driver assistance systems are one example. Once optional, these technologies are now effectively mandatory. Cameras, radar units, sensors, processors, and software are built into nearly every new vehicle, regardless of whether buyers want them. You can't buy a vehicle that has no technology on it. You can't buy a vehicle that doesn't have all these safety features because that's the only way they sell it with all of the mandates. And these systems increase manufacturing costs, repair costs, and insurance costs, which makes everything more expensive. But they cannot be removed without violating federal standards. People have tried, and some have gone to prison. Now, emissions regulations add another layer of expense. Even gasoline-powered vehicles now rely on increasingly complex emissions control systems, specialized materials, software calibration to meet tightening federal and state requirements. These systems add cost without adding utility for the average driver. Yet, they are non-negotiable for manufacturers. Connectivity mandates have also changed on what a new vehicle is. Modern cars are required to support data transmission, monitoring systems, and software updates, and we've covered that on our channel. This infrastructure is not free. Hardware, antennas, processors, cybersecurity compliance all increase vehicle costs, and those expenses are passed directly to you, the consumer. One of the most consequential and least discussed mandates is the federal requirement for advanced driver monitoring and impairment detection systems. I call that the vehicle kill switch mandate, which is now officially in place, even though we've tried to have it stripped from the bill. Maybe we can get Sean Duffy at the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration to reduce it to zero. But embedded in federal infrastructure legislation, this rule requires automakers to install technology capable of preventing vehicle operation under certain conditions, except the software makes the decision, not a person. And regardless of how it's marketed, this mandate requires additional hardware, software, sensors, and system integration in every new vehicle. The cost of that requirement is permanent and unavoidable. Whether or not these systems are ever activated as intended is beside the point. The expense of designing, testing, certifying, and installing them is already built into the vehicle pricing. There is no mechanism for these costs to be rolled back, and no competitive pressure forcing the prices down when every manufacturer must comply with the same rules. Tariffs compound the problem. Import duties on vehicles and automotive components raise production costs across the industry, including for vehicles assembled in the United States that rely on global supply chains. Steel, aluminum, electronic components, and specialized materials are all affected, even though there's more steel manufactured here in the United States than anywhere else in the world. But these costs are not absorbed by automakers and are not controlled by dealers. They are passed directly on to you, the buyer. Labor costs are also influenced by regulation. Compliance requirements increase production complexity, lengthen assembly times, and require specialized training. New labor agreements reflect these realities, further embedding higher costs into vehicle pricing. Once incorporated, these costs do not retreat. They actually never retreat. So there's got to be other ways to reduce costs. Maybe that's regulations. But there's more to this. The idea that prices will fall when supply chains improve, well, that's not how regulations work. Supply constraints can ease, but compliance costs only move in one direction. Every new mandate raises the floor price of a vehicle, Even if the manufacturer wanted to produce simpler, lower cost vehicles, they are often legally prohibited from doing so because of the overall cost and the mandates. And this is why entry level vehicles have largely disappeared from the marketplace. Automakers did not abandon affordable cars because consumers stopped wanting them. Actually, they do want them. They stopped building them because regulatory compliance made them unprofitable or impossible to sell at a lower price point. When the baseline cost of compliance exceeds what buyers can pay for a basic vehicle, the product simply vanishes. The used car market offers little relief because it's affected by the same system. As new vehicles become more expensive, consumers hold on to older vehicles longer, and the average age of vehicles on American roads has climbed to over 13 years old. And fewer later model vehicles enter the used car market, tightening the supply, pushing the prices higher, and consumers start to look at used vehicles because of the cost of new vehicles being so high. Regulatory-driven costs in the new car market ripple outward and affect every segment, and this is a problem. Electric vehicles are often promoted as the regulatory solution, but they illustrate the same problem. EVs carry higher upfront prices largely because they are built to meet policy goals rather than market demand. Mandated technology, battery source rules, and compliance regulations add cost to the complexity. For many buyers, EVs increase financial exposure rather than reduce it, and they're stuck with the vehicle once it's used that they can't sell with higher insurance rates. It is important to separate responsibility from rhetoric. Dealers do not design vehicles, they do not set federal rules, they do not control tariffs, emissions mandates, or technology requirements. They sell the vehicles that are legally allowed to be sold at prices determined upstream by regulation-driven cost structures. As long as vehicles are treated as platforms for policy enforcement rather than consumer goods, prices will remain high. There is no market mechanism capable of reversing regulatory cost creep. Once the mandates are implemented, they become permanent fixtures and the costs compound over time. Consumers should not expect meaningful price relief absent a fundamental shift of how vehicles are regulated. The forces driving prices upward are not cyclical, they are systematic. And until policymakers acknowledge the cost of forced technology and regulatory layering, the $50,000 car will remain the rule rather than the exception, and prices might go up. High vehicle prices are not a market failure. They are a policy outcome, and unless the reality changes, so will the definition of what Americans can afford to drive. If you like this video, give it a like and subscribe for more videos like this, and check out our car review channel, Car Smarts. You can support me by buying me a cup of coffee, and if you want even more content, check out the links in the description. I'm Lauren Fix. Thank you so much for watching.